With the numbers we publicly disclosed, like in the first 8 weeks, we went from 0 to 20 million of ARR, and we've just continued to grow since then. We actually wrote an operating system that runs natively inside of your browser that boots in like 100 milliseconds. There's zero latency. There's no cloud VMs that have to get spun up. It gives you a very reliable experience that actually can scale. If you force people to go download a thing to their computer and set all it up, and then they get to use the drop-off is insane, right? I mean, it's like 90% or something, if not more, whereas when it's native in the browser, it's frictionless. And the actual AI augmentation then actually even picks up, from there, right? So like there's a order of magnitude more complexity of to set up an environment locally for any of these things.
Hello, and welcome back to the Cognitive Revolution. Today, we're simultaneously releasing the first two parts of a series that we're calling Software Supernova, with the makers of new and stunningly fast-growing full-stack AI developer products, Bolt and Lovable. Both episodes explore, in different ways, how AI's rapidly improving coding capabilities are beginning to tangibly transform the software industry by expanding the space of what can be built, changing how professional software developers work, and making it possible for people to create software without ever learning to code. My guest in this episode is Eric Simons, founder and CEO at StackBlitz, makers of Bolt, online at Bolt.new, which has suddenly gone vertical after adding an AI coding assistant to the web-based IDE that they'd spent the previous 7 years building. After announcing that they'd reached $20 million in annual recurring revenue after just a couple months in market, the company has gone on to raise and recently announced a $105 million funding round. In this conversation, Eric walks us through how the company's foundational web container technology works and how it's allowed them to scale so rapidly, explains the company's open source approach and shows where we can check out their prompts on GitHub, uses the agent to build a Spotify clone with just a few natural language interactions, showcases a few web apps that real customers have built, and describes how product managers are having especially notable success using Bolt to bypass design platforms like Figma and instead go directly to working prototypes. Video of the demo, by the way, is on YouTube, and the app design did come out looking really good. But you can take my word for that, and I think you'll be fine with the audio-only version if you prefer. We also discuss how the economics of AI development are creating unique opportunities for Bolt users. One freelancer, Eric says, spent $7 on Bolt inference to deliver a $9,000 project for a client. To be honest, I have no idea how much of that is really happening in the economy at large or how long it will last. But I can confirm that there is at least some real AI arbitrage going on right now. Businesses that are used to paying tens of thousands of dollars for projects are now effectively paying thousands of dollars per hour in some cases without realizing it. In any case, I'm confident that the market, including the market for rapid response human help that Eric and team are planning to build on the Bolt platform, will rapidly bring prices down and send quantities soaring before we know it. And once again, I feel like the safest bet in the AI revolution is high consumer surplus. As always, if you're finding value in the show, please share it with friends, write a review, or reach out via our website, cognitiverevolution.ai. We always welcome your feedback and suggestions. For now, I hope you enjoy this unique perspective on AI-powered software development with Eric Simons, CEO of StackBlitz, makers of Bolt, online at Bolt.new. Eric Simons, founder and CEO at StackBlitz, makers of Bolt, online at Bolt.new. Welcome to the Cognitive Revolution.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
You guys have made a splash, to say the least, in one of the hottest categories going right now, which is the full stack AI software engineer. People are prompting their way to all sorts of creations on your product, and the revenue is popping off. You guys have raised a bunch of money. We're going to get into all of that. For starters, I would love to get just a kind of general sense of your AI worldview, because I feel like so many of these conversations are much more intelligible, much easier to sort of understand the details when you have the person's big picture in mind. How would you describe where we are right now in the AI moment? What is your expectation for like AGI or transformative AI? Are you somebody who worries about risk? Do you maintain a P-Doom? Give me the Eric Simons AI worldview in a minute.
I guess to me, what's been very interesting, if you kind of rewind a couple of years when the ChatGPT came out, the first year after that, I mean, it's just people are like, AGI is going to be here within a year, da 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 da. I mean, there's a lot of hype, and understandably, because it was this obviously a pretty big 0 to 1 moment sort of thing. And these models have gotten really good at certain things, but software is one that makes sense that it's getting a lot faster because its code is text-based, and right, and so it's easy to train these things. And it's also, code is deterministic. Like if you want to train an LLM to be good at law, you're looking at like the cases dating back to, the 1700s and like how this judge felt at the time. It's not deterministic. But with code, you can write code, and AI can write code, evaluate it, did it do the thing or not, and then that's a new test case, right? So it makes sense that in the past year, that's where, I think some of the biggest leaps have happened, and that's going to continue. So I guess my pragmatic AI worldview is just, the world software order is getting rewritten. I think the world software is actually going to be maybe the first major tectonic shift that's going to happen where stuff is just getting replaced by AI. Like software is, one-to-one getting replaced by being generated new. And I think that's going to be huge because, the bar is going to be lowered for creating software. So I think to me is the most interesting, very tangible what is happening right now versus kind of, postulating like where a year from now, 5 years from now, you know what I mean? And then at least to me, it's like, I like to take a more like, what's the pragmatic on the ground view of what we actually see moving in a meaningful way. And obviously the stuff around reasoning is a pretty big breakthrough, I would say. But again, where's going to have the most, where's going to be a multiplier, particularly it's like software, apply reasoning into software development, boom, that's huge. Anyway, so I think that's kind of my general worldview. Holistically, I think it's just going to be a good thing. I don't think that this is going to be, like every other technology that's come before this, it tends to be a great enabler of like a different future. And it's things, are reconfigured differently, but it doesn't strike me that what I see now is just people that couldn't code before being able to build real production products, with software, and engineers that are fantastic today are, can leverage themselves 5-10x, right? So the world needs more software. We've been constrained.
Yeah, it's definitely been pretty much universal, I would say, among businesses that create software at all, that if you had asked, at any point in time, and still to today, is there more you would like to be creating if you could? Then they're all like, yeah, we're totally constrained by how many developers we have. We're constantly making these trade-offs, constantly prioritizing. I've certainly lived that life myself. But your comments about reasoning, obviously we're in the 01 to 03 transition period, and also the R1 moment. It is crazy to think that we haven't seen it as the public yet, but the 03 results where they have the model in the top 200 coders in the world on competitive coding challenges is really a pretty crazy result, right? I mean, that's like beating almost everybody at OpenAI. I think they said there was like maybe one person left at OpenAI who has a higher score in competitive coding challenges than the latest model does, which is pretty wild to think about. So I sort of am a big believer in like, we need more software. I've also kind of started to be a big believer in the concept of luxury software, or I just saw the phrase for the first time yesterday, selfish software, and those are kind of similar ideas, but basically like potentially you don't need to create software for a mass market. Potentially you can just create it for yourself or for your team, or, you can create AI apps that spend an unreasonable amount of tokens because it's worth it to you, even if you couldn't necessarily take it to market in a scalable way. I would love to hear what your vision is in terms of how you think we'll be interacting with software, what the software landscape might look like in the future. Because I do also feel a tension where I'm like, to some degree, yes, I want these personal things that are just made exactly for what I want. But then I also am kind of like, but also I do really want to use like well-polished stuff with like good UIs, It's sort of, in today's world, it's easy to have that vision, but then it's also easy to get to a point where you're like, I tried making this thing for myself and it has a lot of bugs and it actually is not, I'm not exactly living the dream yet. So, put a little more color on like what the future of the software development and user experience might be.
No, it's a good point. I mean, if I had to like rephrase this, you're kind of pointing out there's kind of a long tail of like, okay, you can have this thing punch out software, right? But there's a long tail of like UX and even just support issues with it that are certainly today are not addressed. And it's like, even if you kind of look forward, it's like, okay, well, if you're constantly having to have, what, I mean, at least today are expensive models and maybe that price, it's just going to keep going down. But so it's just really a question of how far out into the future is the long tail dealt with? Like, where does equilibrium hit basically? And I think you're kind of hit the nail on the head is I think, for certain use cases today, it already makes sense, right? Like for people that are using Bolt, they're building internal tools for their company that are actually relied upon for critical business function or whatever. People are building real products that are like their startups and that sort of thing. So it's like, I think in both of those cases, you're kind of dealing with people that have a keen eye for product. And I think like the people that find the most success with Bolt, and I imagine other tools in a similar space, is like, they tend to be like PMs and or designers and that sort of, and of course engineers, but I'm going to kind of put them aside because they know how to like write software. But the people that don't know how to code, it's like entrepreneurs, PMs, they know how to build great products. They know what that experience looks like and feels like. They know how to actually sculpt the thing, and previously they could only write that code through someone else's fingertips, and so again, PMs, like their job is really interfacing with developers and like helping point them in the right direction, how to, actually, make the product experience great. Now with the AI, they're just saying basically the same words, but just getting an instant result and be like, no, like, no, more of this, less of that or whatever. Right. So anyways, I think for folks that fit that category, I think that they're already finding a lot of success today. And over the next year or two, it's going to be even more. For when you kind of get to like general end user, I think the point's extremely valid where it's like, to reasonably expect, someone who has not been in like the business of building products to really be able to build something that's going to be bug free and a great experience, I think there's going to need to be more, in short, like under the hood, just more inference and more capabilities in these models and the agents to actually allow you to do that. Because right now it's just very rudimentary. It's very rudimentary. And there's like a lot of the issues that people run into that when they use, Cursor or any other tool, then when they're non-technical, it's like, when stuff goes wrong, it's like, how do you fix it? So that's, I think, certainly trending that way. And it's like, I think a lot of the folks in that category, PMs, entrepreneurs, designers, et cetera, I think that's going to be the first big market unlock here. It's already happening. Like these folks are coming online writing software, and like next few years, that's going to explode.
That's quite interesting and sort of anticipated another question I had in terms of just like, who are your target customers today? So it sounds like they are people who are gaining leverage and doing things they probably otherwise just would never see bubble up to the top of their to-do list because they can now talk to a product like Bolt instead of having to talk to a human. And obviously the cost ratio there is massive.
Yeah. So our user base, like we see, something like 40% developers, 30-40% are traditional software developers. 60-70 is folks that are like PMs, entrepreneurs, that sort of category. They're not software developers. In the developer category, this is a 10x multiplier on their ability to go and like make prototypes or ship, create UI or whatever have you. So they're coming to us to drop in stuff from Figma or prototype out an app they've been thinking. And instead of going and, writing out a whole bunch of code or having to instrument stuff in Cursor or whatever, they just come to Bolt.new, they drop it in, hit enter, a couple of prompts, they get something great, they pull it out to Git or locally or whatever, and then continue building on it. So that's like a very concrete use case. Like that's one of the ROI stories. There's this guy CJ on Twitter. I don't know what his handle is, but he's got like the most insane ROI that I've seen. But basically, so he's like a freelancer, and his client had him build a web app. It's like some dashboard or something. And he spent like, I think it was like $7 worth of inference on us. And someone asked, the question I would have asked, had they not, which was like, how much did you build the client? And the answer is $9,000. It's just, so if you like go to like Twitter and you search like Bolt arbitrage, like there's a lot of developers, like freelancers that are connecting the dots here, right? Because the demand supply curve, it has not begun to normalize on that yet, right? So that's kind of that one category. And we have a Fortune 500 using it to prototype instead of using Figma and that sort of thing. On the PM's entrepreneur side, folks are coming here where whether it's a side project, they want to launch a startup or a side business, they're using Bolt to build full stack applications with payments and authentication and database and all that sort of stuff. And even if they're at a company, again, like, I mean, if you think about like the role of a PM, a lot of their job is like writing Jira tickets, explaining how to make the product better, and assigning it to someone who's going to code it. They say they did it. The PM reviews the work. They give feedback. It's like wouldn't it be great if they could just like, instead of writing the Jira ticket, they just tell an AI to do it, get the immediate feedback. When it looks good, they just commit it, and then the developer can pull it down, and they had no idea if that was written by a coworker or an AI. It doesn't matter. And so that's like, we're seeing that use case a lot as well, for both people that are starting their own stuff, starting their own project startups. But, now we're seeing businesses start to come online where it's like, oh, okay, like this is a huge multiplier. Like the devs, it's a better use of the devs' time to work on really tough functionality that like the AI models are not great at or whatever, right? Zero shot at least. And the PMs can go ahead and make the kind of the sort of like level of UX polish you're describing, where it's like, make the buttons align, make the colors right, like make sure that this goes to that page when you click submit. Simple stuff like that. It's like, they can just do it and they can make sure it's perfect and then ship it, right? So those are kind of the two segments of the audience we see in the sort of use cases that they're finding a lot of success with.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming, and fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all of your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI for new US customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/cognitive. That's oracle.com/cognitive. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Inflation's up or down. Can someone please invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backward and more time on what's next. As someone who's spent years trying to run a growing business with a mix of spreadsheets and startup point solutions, I can definitely say, don't do that. Your all-nighters should be saved for building, not for prepping financial packets for board meetings. So, whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. And speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/cognitive. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/cognitive. That's netsuite.com/cognitive. Yeah, that's interesting. So if I imagine not too long into the future, it seems like everybody has this vision, and it seems like from your answer, we're not quite there yet to where people who have not been in the product creation business at all could start to get into the game. I imagine kind of a number of different stumbling points or barriers that they would have to get over, some of which would apply even to today's users, the developers, and even for the PMs and even the developers, but others would be sort of easier for your current user profile, but harder for these, like my dad or my mom, who's never done anything like this. But my dad has plenty of ideas. So maybe we can just run through a few and you can kind of tell me how you're thinking about it. One is like just drawing out of people what it is that they want. I think when my dad sits down at something like this, he greatly underspecifies what it is that he even wants and doesn't even know that he's doing that, right? He just is like, he's so green in this area, and then he gets something back probably from a lot of products where he's like, that's not what I wanted. And so I wonder to what degree there's a way to get over that. I also would flag, as you did, when things are not working, how do you fix them? That has been probably one of the trickiest pain points. I'm really interested to hear how you are addressing that and, what you think the sort of trajectory is there. Another one is deployment. And that's also, I'm sure, like a really critical one for your business because, and I've lived this reality too at times. So it's like, it's one thing if people can come in, make something with your product, export it, and never have to come back. It's another thing if you become part of how they actually operate their business. So I'm sure that's something you think about a lot. And deployment is definitely a major pain point. You might also have your own, taxonomy of other challenges, but sound off on those three at least.
So on the first one, right, like people that have not worked as entrepreneurs or product folks before, et cetera, we have folks that are coming to the product and using it that don't fit those categories exactly. And everyone has to learn, right, how to build great products. Like that's like, there's kind of a general skill set of kind of learning how to like really sculpt something, right? And what's cool about Bolt is, and again, like or just these AI generative tools, is that it's lowering the barrier to entry to come and like learn how to actually build great stuff instead of getting mired in like, what my co-founder and I, we grew up down the street from each other in Chicago when we were 13 and we learned how to code together. And we learned how to code together because we wanted to build products. Like that was the reason we got into building software. If this existed then, I don't know how deep we would have necessarily had to go or have gone on becoming software engineers, because our end goal is to build great products. And so I think we have a ton of people that are coming today to Bolt and they're learning by actually working with the AI on how to best leverage it to build products and picking up the general, how do I build products or how do I build a business skill set, right? And like, so it's funny, like actually a couple of weeks before we launched, I had my mom who's 73 test this thing out because she's I love her, but she would admit this readily. She's probably the least technical person you'll ever meet. And she built and deployed her first website on this thing without any guidance because it's the simplest interface in the world. It's a text box that you type in what you want, you hit enter, and then there's a deploy button, where you get a live URL of the thing. That's it. There's a lot of use cases too that we've seen of just people building this for weddings. For one guy who had tweeted us, his daughter needed medical donations or something like that. And he created a website to do that, which to me was kind of like, it was touching, but I was also like, should I tell this guy that like Wix exists, right? Or Squarespace? Because we're not the first people that have allowed you to build a website. But then it hit me like for my wedding website in 2021, I used Squarespace because my wife, I had originally wanted to build the site myself. I spent a day on a weekend on it, never came back to it because it just takes a lot longer than you want. So she, made me use Squarespace and man, the interfaces for those things suck. These drag and drop builders are really complicated to use. And they're supposed to be like targeting less sophisticated computer users than me. Right? But when you look at Bolt, this is it. So it's like that entire category is like, it's going to go away. I mean, like this, there's no reason for drag and drop whissies when you have this sort of stuff, right? So anyway, so on how do you educate these folks though? How do you make them successful? So I think there's two direct ways that you can do, and then there's kind of a rising tide thing that's going on. But basically, one, education, like teaching folks. Instead of just like the school of hard knocks of them prompting the AI and figuring it out, create great resources. I think this is one of the things that's been very effective for us is like we've invested a lot in our community because if you look at Midjourney as probably one of the best examples, what made Midjourney really successful was the community of people prompting, but then sharing those prompts and et cetera. And so that's kind of the same thing we've got with Bolt where we have a very vibrant community of folks that are sharing how they are doing it. And we're learning a ton from these people because like they've used the product more than our own core team has at this point, like they're the kind of the domain experts on the thing. So we invest a lot in our community, our educational resources, that sort of thing. That's like a long running sort of, how do you kind of ramp people? The second thing is just, we're not at a point tangibly, depending on if you're trying to build something pretty complex, we're just not at a point where you can actually, without any technical knowledge, just rely on an AI to get all the way there. And really what you need is just someone like who's reasonably technical or is just very good at bugging these things or whatever, to grab like 30 minutes of their time and just kind of plug them into your code base. And so we haven't announced this. I think we're going to announce it like next week. I don't know when this is coming out, but like if this scoops our announcement, I guess it was heard here first. But so we're actually like rolling out a program where within Bolt, like you can actually kind of raise your hand and go, hey, like I'm stuck on something, and we can actually connect you with like an expert that we've like certified that can like punch in, help you get debugged real quick, and then get you back on your way. So you just keep using the AI and that sort of thing. So it's just like basically a way to just get quick on-demand help to get unblocked or get a professional opinion on it and then move on and that sort of thing. I'm not aware of anyone else that's done that model really well. So I think we'll probably be one of the first. And I think the third thing is these models just keep getting better and we're making our agent better and better, et cetera. And the quality of the models has just a multiplier on the swing of, everything that's leading up to that, like how much you have to learn, how many times you need to loop a human into the process to help debug you, right? So it's like, I think if you look forward over the next 3, 6, 12, 24 months, I mean, it's the better those get, the less you're gonna have to rely on the other things to actually keep, proceed, right? But even today, it's like we've crossed this chasm where it's crazy valuable. That wasn't true a year ago.
Yeah, I think we've officially put to bed the no progress since GPT-4 narrative that popped up for a little while there. But even before like the O1 sequence, I was like, guys, like there's been a lot of progress on just making GPT-4 class models, do the things that we actually want them to do in a much more consistently useful way. So I totally agree that the progress has been pretty amazing, and especially in areas like code. So it's really, I think that the human in the loop thing is really interesting. You guys are literally exploding right now. I don't know what metrics you're tracking or how much time you have to even stay up to date on metrics, but do you have a sense for what your success rate is? If somebody sits down at the product and is like, I want to build X, how often do they actually get to X versus getting stuck somewhere that they can't get out of? And do you have a sense also for like what has moved the needle on that success? I assume that, getting the model to do a better job is core to that, but I'm kind of wondering like, are you fine tuning? You did mention like choosing integrations. That's another thing that I think people are like very overwhelmed by default, right? Oh my God, I want to do payments, but what do I use?
Yeah.
It seems like you're being pretty prescriptive on sort of, this is the happy path that we think we really think you should go this way. I imagine that's been a driver of the success rate, but yeah, what is the success rate? What's driving the success rate? And what do you think will drive it in the future?
Yeah, good question. I think we're seeing a good success rate. I think that, at a high level, you measure this with just like revenue growth. And, for us, like with the numbers we publicly disclosed, like in the first 8 weeks, we went from 0 to 20 million of ARR and we've just continued to grow since then. And so we haven't seen the ARR go down at all, right? And so I think that when you dig into the usage metrics as well, it's just we're kind of setting, more and more folks come to the platform. The retention is extremely good. With a lot of these products in the AI direct to consumer space, the churn on these things can be insane. I mean, they can be like 60, 70%. We're nowhere close to that. I think the acceptable is anywhere from like 20 to 50. We're hanging out like the 25% range, which is like pretty good. So people are finding a lot of success in the product and finding a lot of value in it because they're sticking around, they're coming back every day, et cetera. And, I think there's some, you can kind of like look this stuff up online, but as far as like AI code products globally, if you kind of exclude like Microsoft, GitHub and et cetera, we look at the startups like from, I think free markets are a good way to just measure how much value is being generated, right? For folks in startups, like Cursor is number 1 at 100 million. We're number 2. And then there's a whole category of folks that are kind of in the, anywhere from like 5 to 15 ARR or something like that. And so there's only been at this point a couple of, there's really only two tools at this point. They've kind of broken out for the rest of the pack, and that's us and Cursor. I'm sure there's going to be other folks that pop out and that sort of thing. But I kind of look at that and it's like, clearly something here is working. And for our product, a lot of this comes down to this technology we made that enables this experience. I can show it in a second, but basically if you think about, okay, well, if I'm going to come to Bolt.new and I'm going to type in words and get a full stack web application back, that sounds great, right? But when you actually go to build these products, the question is, okay, well, where are you actually running the development environment for that? Like where that full stack app is running that the AI is programming, how do you do that? And it just so happens, this is like what our company has been working on for the past 7 years. We start out as a web-based IDE. The traditional way that you solve this problem is you put it on a cloud VM. Like everyone gets their own cloud VM that's using the service, et cetera. And that's kind of been the model of Cloud IDE since Cloud 9 was like the first. And there's never been a breakthrough application that has been used by lots of people that has this model where every user gets a VM for a couple of reasons. One, the experience tends to not be great because you have latency. So every keystroke you're putting in has to be synced to a server. The result has to be synced back to you. Someone's got to pick up the cost of that cloud VM because these things are, they cost money. If you want to scale to 1 billion people, that's 1 billion VMs. So it's a good amount of capital. But the other problem is there's not 1 billion VMs that you can rent on the planet. But there are 1 billion devices. So there's 1 billion laptops, iPads, whatever. And so if you look at how Google Docs and Figma work, like they don't spin up a cloud VM for each user to actually render your designs or, as you're typing the document, your keystrokes show up immediately. And that's because it's using your CPU, your memory, your GPU through the browser as the interface to those parts of your device. And so what our company did is we actually wrote an operating system that runs natively inside of your browser that boots in like 100 milliseconds. There's zero latency. There's no cloud VMs that have to get spun up. It gives you a very reliable experience that actually can scale. And so when you kind of look at the other approaches in the space, a lot of the issues folks will run into is the cloud VM gets borked. It's extremely slow, the latency, there's tons of issues that can kind of happen with these things because they're just running in the cloud. Tends to be a lot more expensive. And whereas with Bolt, you come here in 100 milliseconds, you have a live environment, the AI is just punching code into it, and you see the result like instantly. I think that's like under the hood, something that's like maybe not obvious to folks that are visiting, but from a technical perspective, that's like the crown jewel of our company. Like we spent 5 years building Web Container, this technology, and it just so happened that what we've been building with Frontier AI makes this magic experience that just kind of isn't possible with any other approach, right? So I think that in a nutshell is the key enabler for us. And then beyond that, it's certainly like we're doing a lot of stuff around our AI agent, like a couple of folks in our team that actually built the Web Container technology. Just so happens that before that, they were working in ML and AI. And so when it came time to actually write our AI agent, they knew exactly what to do, to go and build them, but also instrument it so we can actually like leverage the data and the insights to fine tune and make it really reliable and not run into tons of errors for the end user. Because again, we want it to be a smooth experience. So in a nutshell, there's kind of a lot there, but I think that's the 360 of like, why is the experience of this so different, and kind of why has Bolt been a completely different trajectory comparatively to kind of the other stuff that's existed before us and after us,
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
The Cognitive Revolution is brought to you by Shopify. I've known Shopify as the world's leading e-commerce platform for years, but it was only recently when I started a project with my friends at Quickly that I realized just how dominant Shopify really is. Quickly is an urgency marketing platform that's been running innovative, time-limited marketing activations for major brands for years. Now, we're working together to build an AI layer, which will use generative AI to scale their service to long-tail e-commerce businesses. And since Shopify has the largest market share, the most robust APIs, and the most thriving application ecosystem, we are building exclusively for the Shopify platform. So if you're building an e-commerce business, upgrade to Shopify and you'll enjoy not only their market-leading checkout system, but also an increasingly robust library of cutting-edge AI apps like Quickly, many of which will be exclusive to Shopify on launch. Cognitive Revolution listeners can sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/cognitive, where cognitive is all lowercase. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, so visit shopify.com/cognitive to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/cognitive. I've got like a growing collection of these stories of people who were building something hard and then AI came along and made it like, 10x more valuable to sometimes the same user they originally envisioned and sometimes like an entirely new user base. And it sounds like you've had a bit of both, but it's really expanded who can use the product. I've lived, for what it's worth, a pretty similar story at my company, which is Waymark, where we do video creation for small businesses. We've been on this journey, I call it, from DIY to done for you by AI over the last few years. But it's a similar thing where we spent a few years building an in-browser rendering engine for videos. And because we had a couple, and one in particular, major early partnership with a cable company, Spectrum Reach, we had to deliver TV quality specs. So we couldn't take any like shortcuts on the final thing. It had to be 30 frames a second and HD and so on and so forth. It was a little bit crazy to try to do that in the browser. And we ended up with a lot of work into that tech stack. And then it was kind of like, I don't know if you've experienced something similar, but we did sort of have a in-between moment where we were like, okay, this thing's working pretty well. But then we sort of found like, people that are pro video creators, they still want to use the pro tools. People that are not pro video creators were giving us feedback like, yeah, this is great. You know, it's easy to use. And we were like, so why don't you use it more? And they were like, I don't really have any ideas for videos. Or I did have an idea, but you know, I sat down to try to write it and I kind of got frustrated. And we're like, you know, could we improve the product? A lot of times they're like, not really, you know, it's on me, but you know, but it is what it is. And so the AI thing like totally changed that. And now it's sort of accessibility in a web, browser-based sense did not automatically translate for us to actual end user value. But then layering on the AI, totally transformed that. We haven't grown it certainly as fast as you've grown, but it has definitely changed the trajectory for us too.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, that's the exact same story. And like, if you rewind 6 months, we had this awesome technology. Developers loved it, but it's just like we couldn't get them to leave their local tools and therefore build a meaningful revenue generating business out of the thing. So we were looking at like, okay, well, we might need to start figuring out how to wind this thing down, because at some point after 7 years, this is cool technology, but we're a venture-backed company. This has to make sense, right? And that what you just said is exactly what happened with us. And so hearing it's happened with you, I remember you mentioned this when we chatted like a couple of weeks ago, but it makes me think there's going to be more of this, right? Because that's the idea of like, if you think about people that are non-technical, if you look at any profession, most professional tools, if you're going to be using a computer to do it, are local, right? Like video is something that's a graphic setting until Figma was local, right? And Canva, I should say, too, for that matter. Development, video editing, video games. There's kind of this list of things that have not come to the browser yet. And because it's just really tough to get professionals out of the existing environments that they are in. Like Figma and like the G Suite are kind of the only ones that have really broken through. But with AI actually lowering the barrier to entry, I actually think that this stuff being able to live in the browser is a key part. Because, the hardest part, if you want to become a software engineer, and this is like when we started StackBlitz, like the company, that builds Bolt, the key insight that we had is like setting up dev environments has always been the worst part of this. From when we were 13 learning how to code, it's like, you're not even learning how to code. It's like week 1 and 2, learn how to just get stuff installed on your computer and like just get a dev server right. So you're not even coding. You're just poking and prodding your machine to get it to work right. And this happens when you join like Meta or Netflix, or the first month is onboarding to just run the stuff on your computer. Like it's crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, if the experience of your product as a video editing tool, right? If you force people to go download a thing to their computer and set all that up, and then they get to use AI, the drop off is insane, right? I mean, it's like 90% or something, if not more, whereas when it's native in the browser, it's frictionless. And the actual AI augmentation then actually even picks up from there, right? So like there's a order of magnitude more complexity of to set up an environment locally for any of these things. And then there's an order of magnitude on top of that of actually know how to code or operate these things. And so like if you can kind of collapse that full stack, that effectively it seems like there's probably a good number of these plays that could be run here where people that have been building stuff to be browser native by integrating, really great agentic experiences into them can open up to a totally new market of people that'll find value in it. And even for the professionals, because they're like, oh, wow, this is great. I can just punch in here, tell it to make me a video or make me a full stack web app to scaffold out, and then I'll pull it down locally. I mean, it's like it's still valuable, but it just blows the lid off what you can do.
Yeah, it really helps. That model is incredible for sharing as well. I mean, it's the amount of times in the past where I've experienced like, okay, it's done, but where can I use it? That is just an absolute nightmare. It's like, well, it's on my local computer. Okay, but how do I use it? I've got to deploy it to staging. Oh God, I felt that pain. Do you want to do a little demo or?
Sure. Yeah, I was just thinking, maybe I can show you how this thing works real quick. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to go and pull this up. So if you go to Bolt.new, which I love the domain. It's like the simplest thing to remember, So you go to Bolt.new, we've got a free tier. And so one of the cool ones, this thing is probably one of the best tools in the world for actually building beautiful looking user interfaces. So hopefully the demo gods play nice with me here, but we can just kind of punch in anything that we would want to make. So like if I say, make me a music app that looks like Spotify, I'll just go ahead and hit enter. This is like a pretty unbounded request I'm giving this thing, right? What you see here, this kind of looks like ChatGPT or something like that until this happens. And so on the right, this is what I was talking about with the core technology we've been building. This is actually running a full operating system here inside of my browser. It's already booted. It's already installed the dependencies for this project. So right now the AI is just writing out the code for this thing. I can just type in commands like I would, for those who are developers. I mean, it's like a Unix compliant operating system we've built in WebAssembly that's booted inside the browser.
You made your own from the ground up? It's not like Ubuntu derived or anything like that?
No, we had to write it from the ground up, right? And the reason being is if you want it to be fast, if you want it to like boot in like 100 milliseconds, there are things that will let you take a Docker image and convert it to WASM or whatever. But the WASM file ends up being like 100 megabytes or more. It runs 10 times slower.
What's WASM? Like, I guess, how much do browsers sort of anticipate, or how much are they built to enable this? I know like the video story of this, there's like, in our case, it's like there's WebGL. You can use that. It's not necessarily meant to do 30 frames a second, but it can do stuff.
Totally.
What was that like on kind of creating a web container experience?
Hard because like the thing with browsers is that they're very strange with like what APIs, as you know from building on these things. It's not the sort of like really robust interfaces you typically get on your own computer if you were to build software there. And this is why you don't see a lot of these productivity tools that come to the web, because if you want to do it right, you have to actually just start from scratch. And this is the same story of what happened with Figma. So back in like 2012, my co-founder and I actually had the good fortune of bumping into Dylan and becoming friends with him back then when he and Evan were starting Figma. And their first pitch for Figma was not a design tool. Like they were like, hey, we want to build a design tool, but what we have today is just this 3D ball dropping into water. Let me see if I can actually find that. It's like kind of iconic. Figma 3D ball demo. So this is the demo. So Evan Wallace is a co-founder of Figma. He made this demo of 3D, this ball you can bring into 3D water and see the actual ripples of it, right? This is back in 2012. And so this is a game changer, right? Because you couldn't do this in browsers before, but WebGL just landed in browsers. WebAssembly, or the predecessor, had just landed in browsers. And that's like what made this possible. And so their pitch was design could not have come to the browser before, but now it can. Because look at what you can do. We can certainly build a 2D rendering engine around WebGL and WebAssembly, but we have to write it from scratch on top of these specific technologies. And that's what they spent the first year or two doing, was just building a rendering engine that Figma, the product, could actually be built around, right? And so that for us was same deal when we went to build Web Container, which again, is this, when we go to the code view here, this terminal, right? I mean, this is deceptively simple, what you're looking at here, but we had to write something from scratch, because if you want, people expect a web page to load in a second. That means that the size of this operating system is going to have to be like 2 megabytes, maybe a megabyte, and it'll have to boot in like 100 milliseconds. That is what we built here, and we had completely from the ground up, and it took us years. We've been working on this thing for like 5 years at this point. It'll be 6 this year, but just a classic like deep technology play that enables this to boot so fast, right? So if I like hit refresh, let's say there's something wrong with this. Like imagine if Gmail breaks, how do you like fix it? You hit the refresh button. Right? That's the benefit of taking this sort of approach is if there's something wrong with that operating system, it just booted a brand new fresh one, install dependencies, spun up the server, and boom, we're going to see the application in a second here that we just built, right? So that's like, if you kind of compare this to anything else in the space, you're getting connected to a cloud VM. There's a lot of latency. If the thing gets broken, you have to go contact support and be like, hey, and you have to hope that they have good support, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff, right?
That is fascinating. Now that we're here and we've got this thing generated, first of all, did it just generate these images on the fly as well? Are you including?
Yeah, it's smart. So it'll go grab images that it thinks are going to be relevant, right, for you. And so these are the ones it pulled to like.
But these are not like the real album covers, are they?
No, I don't think so. Everything that we're pulling is like royalty free, sort of stuff, or we have the applicable licenses. But yeah, it'll go and grab like good placeholders, and you can tell it to use other stuff if you want. But this is like zero shot, right? I mean, this is all I said was just make me a music app that looks like Spotify. And this is what it punched back, which is kind of incredible that it's this good just on the first shot of the thing. And so like a lot of people, like I mentioned, like a lot of folks are, in the Fortune 500, often they're not saying, hey, I want to build a full stack application from scratch, They're like working on specific UI, whether it's for like Chase's, website for like checking your banking details, or it's like on Netflix, like clicking the next in the series button or whatever, right? And so this is like an incredible environment. Just be like, hey, let me go hammer out some components that look gorgeous. But you can also continue to prompt on this thing. So like, what would be a good example? Maybe I guess doing an audio file, you wouldn't be able to hear it on the stream. But let's say, I can just say like make the play button work and the seek track bar. Let's see what it does. But you can just keep prompting it. You can just tell it like what you want it to do. And so you can, for example, like if we wanted to, if we want to make an actual music streaming application or something with this, we could go and say, okay, here's the Spotify API, add OAuth and like let me log in and, play it through my Spotify account. And it's smart enough to actually just go and be able to do that. And, it's the sort of thing where you might get some errors back and we have a fix error button you can click. Maybe they'll pop up if something here goes wrong. Or you can just go and debug it yourself if you're a developer, or just Google it, etc. But it kind of the sky's the limit with the sort of things that you can build with this thing. I can show some of the stuff folks have built that's like, really sophisticated and full stack. So you can see here the play button is working. It does say there's an error. It actually is using the HTML5 audio API to handle. So that's the error it thrown. It says, there's nothing to play. We would need to give it an audio file. It kind of went beyond what I was expecting it to do here. So this is like, we actually have a tool that can actually play arbitrary audio files, and this seek bar actually would work if we plugged it in and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can imagine a Suno or a UDO. I don't know if those guys have APIs yet, but you're an API call away from generating your own music and kind of living a real hallucinated dream here.
I've seen people make stuff with, I think Suno might have one, because there's a guy who made like a meditation app using Bolt, and it goes to Suno and grabs it says, make me some music that's, Zen. and it has you like breathe in and breathe out with this. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, it's like, when he tweeted, I was like, I looked at the market cap of Calm, and it was like, I think it was like $3 billion or something. I was like, I have his app pinned on my phone now. I'm like, why? That's insane. Like, he built that in like 10 minutes. It's wild.
Yeah, that is, disruption might be coming sooner than some expect.
Totally. And just like I said, maybe some examples of stuff that folks have made. So this is actually made by a gal. She's a PM at a software banking company in Thailand. And so this is like she started this as her side project. But basically the idea with viral hooks, super cool idea, is effectively you can come here and sign up, and this product helps you. I don't know if you've ever had the inclination to be like a viral TikToker or whatever. Yeah, I've never tried, but like you got to think about what it takes. Like you have to have like a good hook to keep people watching, right? And so what she did with this is it actually like reverse engineers, the scripts of what popular creators do to like make their hooks. And she made an AI agent that you kind of give it the content you want to talk about, and then it'll actually like create viral hooks for your scripts, right? And so like a week before Bolt came out, she actually listed this project on Upwork. And I think the quote she got it was from like a Ukrainian developer, and I want to say it was like 3 or 4K or something like that. And I think the timeline was it would take like 3 months or something in that range, which like is pretty reasonable, kind of given the scope of the project we're talking here. And then the week after that, Bolt came out and she signed up for our $50 a month plan, and she had the thing built and launched in 2 weeks, with a full-time job. So like the ROI reduction there is crazy. I mean, it's like a 99% cost reduction. It's a tax faster delivery. And there's another case of this guy named Paul made this entire CRM using Bolt. And this has like an AI agent built into it. So I think I can zoom in here. So you can actually like, I don't know if you ever use a CRM, these things suck. They're so boring to use. He has this AI agent built into this. So if you don't want to click through to, do actions. Hey, I met with this guy. Can you log it? And it just does it, like a pretty sophisticated application he made. And it was the same deal. He spent like $200 or $300 on Bolt. The quote he got from an agency was $30,000. It was going to take 6 months. And he had this done. I think it was in a month for this one, which it's just like wild, and so these are both like startups that have launched and are making money at this point, just like two tangible examples here. But yeah, I mean, I should mention both these folks are not technical. They're not coders. They made these things and, completely without even having to tap developers to even help them finish it. Right. Which made incredible products here, So this is I got kicked out. I'm on the free trial. I guess I'm like logged in here, but I mean, this is real. It's like, I should buy this. I should support the Chilled CRM. But anyways, this is kind of insane that you can actually, without any technical knowledge, you can build real products like this at this point,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. What does your pricing look like? Because you mentioned like a sort of monthly plan, and then it sounded like there was sort of usage-based pricing as well.
Yeah, totally. So this is actually one of the interesting things that I think we were kind of the first to discover, and a lot of people have followed suit because it makes sense and it works. So a lot of these like code gen tools, like GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT, they've had this thing where from the days of like, where you pay like Netflix, you're like, oh, I should pay $20, kind of get like all you can eat access. But like, if you eat too much, like you have to like slow down, we're going to throttle you. And so what we ended up doing with Bolt is like, instead of like trying to cram it into $20, we were like, hey, you can just pay for as much inference as you need. And we gave people different plans. And so it starts at 20, it goes up to 200. Folks need even more than that. You can actually buy tokens or inference tokens. You can buy them as needed as well outside of your subscription. But you can kind of pick what makes sense to you. And what we see people do is they come in, they try the free tier, they love it, they run out of tokens, they upgrade to the $20 tier. They're like, oh, this is good. This is building incredible stuff. This is totally worth $20. They burn through that. They keep upgrading, right? Because it provides so much value. I mean, just for an engineer, $7 to selling it for $9,000, like that one example. And these folks are saving 99% compared to going with a freelancer or contracting firm or whatever. When people start doing, they get to feel the math as they use the product. They just naturally upgrade to the higher tiers. Because this is totally worth the money, right? So that's for individuals. We also have team plans for organizations are buying it for their employees and that sort of thing. But again, it's all based on the number of tokens that you're using per month.
I guess a couple questions there. One is, if I'm doing my math right, your per token price is lower than the Claude Sonnet 3.5 token price, which suggests you're probably not using either you're counting on people to not use all their tokens in a significant way, or you're using different models. It was just interesting when I was trying the product, I was like, I wonder what model they're using. So how are you thinking about whether, and in like Cursor, for example, they do just, I can just choose my model, right? So there's an interesting kind of different approach there where you are not making it clear to the user what model, and you have sort of, a pricing layer that is not fully transparent into, even though they can see their usage, but they don't know exactly where it's going. How are you thinking about that? And, can you tell us anything about what models you, in fact, are using under the hood?
We're super open about it. So yeah, we use Sonnet 3.5 a lot, and we're using other models too in various places. I appreciate the call out of like, hey, this is cheaper than Claude. Because people often are like, man, this is so expensive. Like, I'm just going to use Claude directly. And we're like, go for it, because it's going to be more expensive. It's like one of the benefits, of, I think top 3 or 4 or 5 or something customers, right, our upstream AI vendors is like, we can negotiate volume discounting on this stuff. And so that's like one of the benefits of having a subscription-based model, is that because we can project forward of like, hey, here's how much inference the user is effectively reserving, we can actually go and negotiate accordingly. Say, hey, we know that we certainly need this much inference, in over the next months or whatever, right? So that's like a huge advantage for us on a pricing perspective, because we can, price the thing aggressively. And one of the other kind of cool things about this is when people say, hey, like this is a lot of money or whatever. And some people are like, this is so cheap. when you kind of understand the ROI, it's like, this is so cheap. For folks that are maybe just kind of learning how to build products, you're like, wow, this is a lot of money. It's like, yeah, well, one, you probably need to, kind of learn how to ramp up on like how to best control these AI things. But two is you can actually run Bolt locally. So this is like a pretty unique aspect of our product versus pretty much everything else out there in this space or whatever. When we launched Bolt, we actually launched an open source version of it. If you go to I think it's a Bolt.diy, this kicks you to our official repo for this. And so you can actually run Bolt using any LLM. So you can, choose the Gemini APIs, you can use OpenAI. This past week, DeepSeek landed in this. And so what's great is you can actually, this is kind of like our testing bed of, hey, what are the best models in the Bolt production application? What are the things that really show great promise, great results in our open source stuff? And then we pull that forward and build it into the product. You can just plug in your own API keys and use this locally, et cetera. And, I think it's gotten pretty wildly popular because, again, there's not a lot of products like a good AI agents, and certainly to the level of quality that we're talking here. Most of this stuff is kept closed source because I think, what's your moat? I mean, like for us, we've been building the core technology of the dev environments for 7 years. So it's going to take time for anyone that wants to build something to the fidelity and speed and accuracy that we've got. But so from our point of view, is like there's only upside to put an open source version out there that people can build and fork on and improve. It's actually become a pretty popular thing that the AI labs use because they actually will go to Bolt.diy to actually test out their new models to see, okay, well, how well does this perform in like an actually real world application? Because like a lot of these benchmarks for software engineering, the evals or whatever have you, it's like they're good to test against, but it's, you're kind of talking, you're not talking about a very dynamic test there, right? It's like a specific test case that it passes or fails or whatever have you. And so with our open source version of Bolt, they can actually come here and do things that are even like a bit more qualitative, like how good is the design that comes out of this stuff, zero shot, right? And just how good is this an agentic experience of building a real application versus just, a to-do app that's not even styled, So this is actually a very, like, I think one of the, maybe counterintuitively, one of the big reasons that I think Bolt has kind of pulled away from a lot of the other stuff in the space is that you see this with a lot of popular open source projects, like, people end up kind of consolidating around the things that are open source that they can fork and use and modify their own needs. And that ends up being a tide that lifts all boats, and especially like whatever products the company that's building the open source project are making. We see a lot of people try Bolt.diy and then buy a Bolt subscription, still use Bolt.diy. Like, so, it's just a very symbiotic and cool thing that we're doing here because I don't see anyone else doing this.
I noticed the last commit was 9 minutes ago at the time that you loaded the page, which is couldn't have timed that better. So what exactly am I understand that when I go to the main web experience, all the code is loaded into my browser. I'm running this local container in the browser itself. What exactly am I downloading when I download DIY, and am I still ultimately like using it in my browser, or is it a different paradigm?
No, great question. Yeah. So what Bolt.diy does, it basically runs the open source variant of Bolt.new just on your local machine. When Bolt.diy is doing the code streaming and execution, it's still using web container inside of your browser to do that. Really, all Bolt.diy is doing is letting you run that locally on your own device or on your own server or whatever have you, right? So, and basically, this is great if you want to have an offline experience of running DeepSeek locally. You can actually use Bolt offline with Bolt.diy with DeepSeek locally, connected directly in, et cetera. So we see a lot of like enterprises starting to pick up Bolt.diy to run behind their VPNs and use whatever inference they've got behind there, et cetera, right? But it's effectively just a way to host the web application of Bolt.new, and it's designed to easily point at any inference provider.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's cool. It is, and I don't recall seeing anything quite like that, so that is cool. I guess Cursor in a way has something similar where you can sort of subscribe, or you can just like use their forked thing, with your own tokens or whatever, but it's always a local app, so it's definitely different too.
And it's closed source, it's like cool they let you do that, but it's I think having it be open source just kind of, a lot of people are interested in this stuff, but how do you actually contribute to something that actually has real adoption, like where you can actually see.
So are all your prompt templates and everything in there too? All the definitions of the happy paths, people can go study like how are you prompting it to make sure it's doing the Stripe integration correctly and all that kind of
Yeah, we've got, let's see if I can find we have our entire system prompt and everything in this guy. And we have some stuff that's, we're that in the Bolt.new side is, we haven't backported, and some stuff we just might not backport, but we have been backporting a good amount of the stuff we are doing. Let me see, where is that? It's been a while since I looked at this code base. My job as CEO sadly keeps me out of our code base for the most part. But I somewhere in here, we've got the entire system prompt in this thing. But yeah, which is kind of cool. Oh, there we go. Get system prompt. Okay, so let's pull this thing up. So prompt/prompts. There we go. Yeah, so there it is. There's the whole shebang. This is like the main system prompt for us, like how Bolt actually works under the hood, right? It's pretty cool. I mean, and there's other prompts that are kind of like chained and, and that sort of thing. But this is crazy useful. I mean, this represented, some months of work for us with really smart folks building it. And where else are you going to find that? Unless you like prompt leak one of the other providers or whatever. That's like, this is forkable, runnable in the product. I imagine like people have made PRs to this prompt.
So you have, I'm seeing here you have, it looks like partial support for Python. I didn't realize there was any support for Python. So it's like the node side, I can download random dependencies. On the Python side, I have like a sort of limited Python. I can't download. I'm seeing here I can't download third party, but I didn't realize there was any at all. So
yeah, we have some basic support for Python. So like the Node.js ecosystem has, we've worked in that one for like half a decade to make pretty much all the major tool chains run in WebAssembly and that sort of thing. Python is not the beginning of the trailhead, but just it's a couple steps down the trailhead of making everything working awesome. And so I believe if I actually go back here, I can probably in the terminal, let's see if we've got this enabled. If I like type Python, we should get back, I think the REPL or whatever. So we've got like, a version of Python that's running in WebAssembly here that we can, kind of execute Python code in. I think we have some basic, standard libraries and stuff baked into this thing. I know it's on our docket to like get pip added in. And I think for a lot of the use cases we're seeing though, it's when we were in IDE, it mattered a lot more to support like every language, that was like our 10-year roadmap or whatever. Now that and we've always unabashedly been focused on web applications. Like that's kind of been the point of, it's like the key insight was like browsers don't have a way, to build web apps, right? I mean, like the web should be able to build the web. That's like, if you look at every other platform, like, Mac has Xcode and Windows has Visual Studio. There's no tool like that built into browsers. And that was the impetus. And so we've always been focused on Node.js and the JavaScript based ecosystem. But yeah, we got Python. I think it's a couple other ones too. Like, so the entire WordPress and PHP ecosystem now actually runs in WebAssembly too. So you can actually run WordPress in this thing. I think Laravel runs in it. And so I think that's like the number two ecosystem behind Node.js as far as compatibility is the PHP one in WebAssembly and web containers at this point. But I imagine, I think by the end of the decade, I think most of the major languages and ecosystems are going to be running in WebAssembly.
Yeah, we'll just ask the superintelligence to handle that for us.
Totally, right? That's a lot of the issue right now is it's just how do you get the engineering hours to kind of really drill in and make that happen? Yeah, agents.
Yeah, and as the market, I mean, it's another difference between developers and everybody else. Developers care what they use. My dad doesn't even want to know. He just wants to see something work. And in the ideal state for him, he's never going to even consider the code or what language it's written in. Best product experience for him. He literally wouldn't be able to tell you at the end what language things were ultimately coded in.
Totally. Well, I think that's what's interesting about the intersection of where we're at versus I think, I maybe Replit is somewhat ish in this space. I think they lean a bit more developed, like heavy developer than we are. But we're kind of at this like the perfect intersection of like providing a great service to developers and providing a great service to non-developers where, especially because we made the core of this thing open source, people are contributing to it. People want to see more stuff working in it, right? And they want Python to work in this. Like there's Python developers like, I want Python. And we get this all the time. Like, I want Python apps. I want this, I want that. And so people are making pull requests and they're making this stuff work, right? And on the flip side of that, kind of upstream, and even what you see working in Bolt today is the result of the past 5 years of like, the tool chain that's running here is called Vite. That ecosystem said, this running inside of WebAssembly and in web containers is important to us because we want to be able to have these in browser environments. Let's make it a reality, and they commit to it, and that's what's making this possible, right? Is like the developers care, and so it's this two-sided ecosystem where without developers caring, you can't enable all these people that you have never programmed before to actually leverage these tools. Right. And so I think that's kind of cool is we're kind of right in the middle of both as where developers care and they love our product. So do non-developers. And so we're able to kind of make this magic happen where, again, like you don't really see that happening in other products or tools or ecosystems,
Yeah, that's cool. I'm learning a lot from that. I really had no idea how far the in-browser containerized world had come and just how many things you could do in it. Nor did I even realize that even from trying the app, which I definitely did, spend some time trying to make something myself, but I didn't get that deep into the
Good, yeah.
internals.
I mean, that's the point. Anyone should be able to use this and be completely unaware. That means we did our job right.
What are some of the other kind of foundational technology pieces that you are tapping into? For example, you mentioned Stripe. You can see Supabase in the UI there. I saw a mention of Vercel, AI SDK.
Oh, yeah.
How did, some of those are, I guess, fairly obvious choices at this point. They've certainly, Stripe has certainly emerged as like a standard, but what would could you run down kind of the list of like the opinionated decisions that you've made and why?
Yeah. So we've got if you're using, there's kind of one track that we're opinionated on. And this is really kind of more for people that are not developers. We want to have a smooth path where they're going to not run into a lot of errors. It's going to be really great. And even for developers that are just looking to quickly build a product or something, right? So kind of in that path, it's like Vite and React, which we've been, for the past 5-6 years, we've been supporting. And like I mentioned them before. So that's kind of your dev tooling and the framework or whatever. For auth and database and like webhooks and that sort of thing, Supabase provides that. So you can click this connect to Supabase button. You can create a project or have you and spin up an actual database for this thing, et cetera. Hopefully, I don't know why this thing, maybe my internet's lagging, but so you can have a database with like auth, a way to actually, create rows, et cetera, with the Postgres database backing it. With that, you can actually plug in Stripes. You can accept billing, which you saw on the chilled CRM site. So this is powered by Stripe, using it for the subscriptions there and that sort of thing. And the final thing that's kind of cool about Bolt, I'm going to refresh the page to get back to a fresh slate. This is the beautiful, wonderful thing. Is if something goes wrong, usually you can get back to a fresh slate. Or maybe not. Maybe I might have borked my dev account before we came on here. But kind of the cool thing about Bolt is that, again, because we're running an operating system in the browser here, like you mentioned this before, actually, I didn't actually answer your question. You're like, how do you actually deploy this somewhere, right? Because that's like often a challenge. Like, hey, you made something cool, and like, how do you actually get it onto a URL and do something useful with it and actually like have a domain? We actually have a built-in integration with Netlify, so you don't even have to sign into Netlify to do this. It's just in every Bolt project, you can just click this deploy button. And I'll flip back to the code view because this is cool. So this is actually running a production build, again, using my CPU. Normally, if like spin up some cloud, CI box or whatever, build a production website, deployed it live on Netlify. That's the URL. And I can share this with you. And if I want to add my own domain, right, if I want to connect this to a Git repo or whatever, I can click on this link, which will actually take me to Netlify and attach it to my account. So I can myspotifyclone.com. It points directly at this thing. And anytime I deploy here and out, so if I want to make the background neon or something, we'll see what it does. As I make changes to this thing, it'll go ahead and update those. And once it's done making these changes, I'll make sure it's good. I'm going to actually be able to just hit the deploy button again. It'll run another build. It'll put it right back onto that URL. So if we had a production.com domain pointed at this thing, it would update live with that, right? So it completely removes the entire deployment part of the question for this experience, which again is like usually one that can be rather challenging to do. So
yeah, deployment is such a nightmare. I'm very excited about things that make deployment easy. And Replit, which you mentioned, was one of the first things that I saw that kind of changed my paradigm there. But this is doing something similarly cool, which is...
And the Replit guys did a great job where like they've baked deployment into the product, right? Which is, I think for like certain types of apps is great. Like I think what's nice about us just having a partnership with an actual deployment platform that's kind of what they do as a business. It's really reliable. You can attach domains to it. You can actually build real products and teams around it, right? And so I think it's like, and that's not to say that what like having an in-house deployment solution, like what Replit doing isn't useful, because I think they've done a really good job there. But a lot of people want to actually host something that's got a real domain and that sort of thing. And so I'll go ahead and kick off another deploy here. This is what it currently looks like for reference. We'll let this thing go ahead and do a production build again. So go ahead and do that. And if I go ahead and refresh, boom, you see our neon colors, right? So it's, insanely simple to get this thing back live. But I think that's probably like one of the most magic parts of the Bolt experience is just having a one-click way to get this thing live on a real prod URL.
Yeah, that's cool. What's coming next? I mean, candidate ideas that I would be interested in your takes on. Obviously, O3 Mini should be coming soon. Allegedly going to be another significant jump in coding ability. Agents in general, of course, are like, big buzzword. But when I've been doing this sort of AI accelerated app development, I've definitely noticed that a lot of my time is spent just copying and pasting stuff around. And even more is like testing the flow that I just had the thing code. So I'm starting to kind of wish for like a cloud computer use to code it, or now we've got OpenAI Operator, which is obviously unlimited, access at the moment, but I do pay the $200 a month, so I had the chance to use it. I kind of wonder, like, are you expecting to sort of create like an AI user, an AI tester? Because that seems like it would be the next biggest chunk of time for me, probably, that would get taken out. Is if I could zoom out one level and go from today, I go, okay, what is my feature that I want to do? I often take that to O1 Pro because, again, I pay for everything, and then have that do a sort of an analysis and kind of plan, make sure that my like overall roadmap for a feature is good. I'll usually put my full code base in there if it fits. And then it's like, okay, now I've got a step-by-step plan. Now I can take that to, the coding agent. Most of my experience recently has been with Cursor. That usually works pretty well. But then I'm like, okay, did it work really well or not? I have to go find the edge cases. So I kind of wish I could zoom out one level up and be like, here's my thing, you go do it. And also you test it and like bang on it 5 times and fix the errors that come up. I feel like I'm already often 5x, faster to do things, maybe in some cases 10x faster than I used to be. And if I could do that, I feel like I would be like consistently more than 10x and maybe, genuinely getting into like 20 plus range for some scenarios.
Totally. I mean, I think the company that's kind of doing what you're describing is like Devin, right? Where I was talking with one of my buddies, Sean Wang. You might know him, or you might have at least seen him on like Twitter or whatever. But he's like a really smart guy, and he's been doing a lot of stuff in the Swix. Yeah. Sorry, I should refer to him by the thing that people know him by. Yeah. I know. I always call him Sean just because I met him in person first before online, I guess. So like everyone calls him Swix, but awesome guy. And so he's like an angel in the company and a good friend of mine. And so, sat down a couple of weeks ago and we were just kind of chatting about kind of this, of like kind of the breakdown of the different products in the AI software engineer space, how they're oriented. And I think, at least my takeaway, and I think Sean would probably agree with it, I think was like, I think the problem with things like Devin, which is not knocking their product, because I think for certain cases, I'm sure it's great. But I think the issue is when you kind of tell an agent to go and do something, and it's going to do something that's like going to take a while. It's going to do a lot of things during that while. Therefore, it's going to spend a lot of inference and whatever during that while. A lot of things can just go wrong. And like, depending on at what stage of the process things went wrong, and kind of cascade. And wrong doesn't necessarily mean, an error happened, but it's like it got confused or it misinterpreted directions and da. And so I think that's kind of the challenge, candidly, for agents, I think, is like when you want to start baking stuff on and it's going to go and do a whole bunch of things, the odds of that collapsing increases the more steps you add into it. Because right now these things are just not, they're just not the fidelity. There's not the fidelity that you would need to really send the thing off into the woods to go and do a meaningfully sized set of tasks, right? It doesn't mean that it can't work in some capacity, but it's like on Bolt, right? Coming back to your earlier question, what's the success rate? And I think from what I understand from what the more longer running agentic things like Devin, the success rate is pretty low, of like where people are like thumbs up, I'm super happy with what the result was, right? Whereas when you flip to something like Bolt, there's a lot more people, to the point where the ARR just continues to ramp because they're seeing immediate results. And if the thing does make a mistake, it didn't go off for 20 minutes burning inference. You're just making a chain of decisions that are from the root of not what you want or whatever, right? And so I think having kind of human in the loop where it's, they're kind of guiding the thing and verifying that it's not screwing stuff up, et cetera, is right now I think where the tangibly you can really squeeze an incredible amount of value out of it. And honestly, I'm a little hesitant. We're doing R&D on the kind of the longer running stuff, but it's like I'm a little hesitant to really try and pull off of that, just because I think humans are just now and for the foreseeable, it's going to be an important part of the creation process, So it's kind of a longer answer to your question. So as far as kind of adding some level of automated testing, there's certainly stuff that can be done around, hey, have the thing write unit tests up front. So it's like as it's building, it's ensuring that it's aligning with that, right? But again, I think part of the trick is, okay, well, how do you write unit tests? If the user's not technical, how do you ensure that those unit tests actually are like good, that they're actually going to be representative of what the end user wanted? That's the big question, I think, around this stuff. That's kind of a longer answer, but that's kind of like my kind of current worldview on just, okay, how do you improve these things generally, and what are kind of the limitations that pragmatically and immediately, we see. But we're investing kind of across the board in those areas, at least.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. In preparing for this, I lined up 4 different products and basically tried to build the same app with all. And they were Bolt, Replit, which I've had the most experience with, Devin, and Lovable. And I would say Devin definitely stood out as being the most different experience from the others in terms of just the paradigm. And it is for the reason that we're just discussing, where it sort of just keeps going. And I feel like I do want that, but I don't want to watch it. And at least as it was at the time that I tried it, which was, 10 days ago or whatever. So these things are changing fast. It was, with the other 3 products, when I came back, literally just like rotating through them and being like, what's the status of this one? What's my next instruction? Tab. And, so I'm like the outer loop, agent, and each one is kind of doing its inner loop. What I found was a little weird with the Devin experience was like, I didn't know where I was, when I came back. So if I had watched it, I would have known where I was, but I didn't want to watch it, of course. I want to do other things. That's, one of the big promises of this. It does feel to me like there is a way to solve that. Like, if you imagine a good, intern or junior person who's helping you with a project like this, the piece that I feel is kind of I do want them to take that initiative. I do want you to test it before you bring it to me. So that's definitely an expectation for a human developer I'm working with, right? Like, don't bring it back to me, not even having tried the happy path. I can expect that there could be some edge cases that you haven't sanded down. But if you haven't been down the fairway and confirmed that it works, you're not doing your job. At the same time, I want like a summary of that. I want to kind of know, not in a like, I have to go back and read through your experiment logs, but I need you to tell me, like, this is where I'm at. I did this. I tested it this way. I confirmed this is working. I got a question here. And that sort of interaction layer, I don't think has been nailed, but I do think I want that, like, several extra turns. But I haven't seen anything yet that sort of brings me that human-like experience of like, here's kind of the update, boss, on everything that happened since last time you were here. And they'd almost need to trigger that on like refocusing of the browser tab, really, or some sort of signal that like now is the time when the user's back for an update. Because I was coming in and it was just kind of midstream and it's working, and I'm like, I don't know where you are, where you've been, but I do think that will get, with time, people will improve that. And I do think I'm definitely willing to wait longer and pay more inference tokens if I can get just like bigger, chunks of things done.
It's definitely going to happen, right? I mean, I think and that's kind of the thing that we kicked off, with the pricing model where it's like you can buy more. That was a result of, Sonnet 3.5 basically has, gotten AI codes into the point where it's good enough where the more money you kind of put into it, you can actually have some realistic expectation of value that it's going to actually be able to give you back on it, right? And that's, before that, that was not the case. Like with the previous kind of frontier models, like we tried building Bolt a year ago, like in February of 24 with the frontier models at that time, and they just couldn't do it. Like the code was too unreliable. The output was, the design output was ugly, if it even worked. I think as these things just improve, like 100%, like, I want that too. If I can, because I do this all the time with my own team where I'm like, hey, can you go ship da-da-da, and they're brilliant folks, so I've worked with them for a while, so we have, like they kind of have a sense of what I'm looking for or whatever, and they'll come back with hey, here's kind of where I'm at in it or whatever. But if you can deliver on that, oh my gosh, yeah, I mean, that's worth every penny and way more actually, right? And I think the trick is really just the accuracy and the user experience. I don't think we're far. I feel like we're probably a model or two release away where the fidelity is at a point where you can meaningfully start doing that for at least some types of workloads. You can have longer running agentic processes that you can actually trust to actually do what you want them to do. I don't think it's far, but it's an important part. I think it's definitely like there's a lot of value, I think, that'll be created from that end of things,
Yeah, it's a tricky balance for you and all these people taking different approaches to this, because it's like to varying degrees. And it sounds like there was a time when you really needed to turn up some business metrics, but everybody wants to deliver value to customers and grow today and have momentum. And you want that positive feedback that's going to make everything better, from including hiring and just whatever. So you need to be sort of in the sweet spot, but you also need to be getting ahead, because we know that like the sweet spot is definitely moving. That's definitely been a challenge, that I've experienced again firsthand. It's like, how do you do both? I don't know. That actually might be a great closing question. And that's about all the questions I had, but I would be interested to hear how you think about balancing the today versus tomorrow. And then you can throw in anything else you want to, if you want to put a bad signal out for hiring purposes or anything like that. Welcome to that too.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we're pretty laser focused on just making our AI agent incredible today. And we've got irons in the fire on a handful of kind of R&D stuff. But I mean, I think it's, there's a very clear line of sight for our product being able to like enabling folks to build incredible software. It's already happening today, and it just keeps getting better, right? Even with the current state of the models. And so I think that's like primarily where our focus is. And there's a part of this too where like there's just tsunami waves that keep hitting every 6 to 12 months with these models. And there were some products that were in this space. I think there's a couple of them, like Replit and Replit V0 and Lovable had like rebranded, relaunched or whatever. But like all these guys were kind of around before Bolt existed 6 months ago or 9 months ago, whatever. And when Sonnet 3.5 came out, they had those product experiences. They had to completely reinvent them, because all of the work they were doing on those agents for previous models just didn't matter anymore. And in some cases, they straight up pivoted their product offerings, right? And so I kind of look at that, and I look towards the future, and it's like, how do you ride tsunami waves into the shore, and then paddle back out and catch the next one versus getting wiped out by it, right? I think that's kind of, it's a delicate balance, just like pro surfers. I mean, there's, it's not an easy thing to do. It kind of takes having a realistic perspective of, hey, what's the probabilities of how this is going to land and what the next one could be, and aligning yourself to catch the thing, right? And sometimes you just can't, of course. But so I think that's kind of how internally we kind of view how we hedge the bets here as we look towards the future, just because we've kind of seen the result of, one or two of these things at this point, and how that's kind of transformed how people's products were oriented. So we're pretty open-minded about what'll happen, So, and to that end, like we're hiring. Yes, we just announced we raised a Series B like a week ago. So we just raised $105.5 million, and we are looking to aggressively expand our team. We've scaled to tens of millions of dollars of revenue, and we have over 2 million registered users. We have a team of 20. we are severely understaffed for the demand we are seeing. I think last time I checked, we have 50,000-60,000 customers, something like that, active. So we are hiring aggressively. So if you go to StackBlitz.com/careers, we'd love to hear from you. I think we're working on some pretty cool stuff, and anyone's interested in AI and the web, and just enabling both developers and people who have never coded in their life to build great software, we'd love to hear from you and work with you.
Cool. Well, this has been excellent. I really appreciate the time and the product demo and some of the deep tech stuff that I didn't know previously. And you guys are on an unbelievable trajectory. So definitely check out, what was the careers page again? It's Bolt.new.
If you go to Bolt.new, there's a link at the top that says we're hiring, so you can click that. Or you can just go to StackBlitz.com/careers. That's like the direct link to the thing.
Alrighty. Cool. Again, this has been amazing. Eric Simons, founder and CEO at StackBlitz, makers of Bolt.new, 20 million ARR in just the first 8 weeks, $100 million raised, and an exciting future in front of you guys.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being part of the cognitive revolution. It is both energizing and enlightening to hear why people listen and learn what they value about the show. So please, don't hesitate to reach out via email at tcr@turpentine.co, or you can DM me on the social media platform of your choice.